I once believed that speaking the truth was enough. That if I simply said what I saw, if I offered my sincerity to protect my father's company, everyone would listen. But the moment I saw my stepmother, Victoria, signing documents that even I, the COO, wasn't allowed to access, I knew something was wrong. And when I rushed to find my father with that heavy suspicion in my chest, I had no idea that moment would open a war that would change my entire life. Bennett Industries stands in the center of Los Angeles, a 42-story headquarters with glossy black glass. My father built this empire over 30 years, turning a small construction firm into a dominant force across California. After my mother died, the atmosphere in the company changed. Colder, heavier, stripped of the warmth that once made it feel like family. And since Victoria arrived, I constantly felt as if an invisible fog had settled over every decision my father made. I am Lucas Bennett, 28, COO, and the sole legal heir. My father, Charles Bennett, 62, recently had heart surgery and has grown weaker. And Victoria Hale, the stunning woman who captured a room with every entrance. She became my father's wife only 2 years after my mother passed. Sharp, clever, and persuasive, Victoria had a strange talent for making everyone believe she was the one keeping the company stable. Employees began to see her as the new matriarch, while I increasingly felt like an outsider in my own family. Everything began on a Monday afternoon. I accidentally saw Victoria stepping into the financial archive, an area only the accounting team and I had access to. She carried a thick stack of papers, signing them rapidly before sealing them into envelopes. When I asked, she smiled and said lightly, "Just internal documents, Lucas, nothing important." But my instincts had never been wrong. The financial system had unauthorized locks, strange transactions appeared, and new contracts surfaced without going through my department. I feared what I saw was only the tip of the iceberg. I spent the entire week digging through old records. Many nights I stayed at the office until midnight, trying to understand where the suspicious payments were going. But every time I opened one file, another was locked with an unknown password. When I asked the accountants, they said they hadn't set any passwords. When I asked IT, they told me the admin privileges had been changed by someone higher up. I knew exactly who. Victoria began appearing in major meetings every day. She sat beside my father, occasionally placing a hand on his shoulder. A subtle announcement. I am the one he trusts. I found myself increasingly pushed out. People who once respected me now avoided my eyes, likely influenced by whatever stories Victoria had spread. But I persisted. One night, while rummaging through the archives on the 12th floor, I found a transportation contract worth $2.3 million, signed by Victoria Hale. I had never seen it in any meeting. Even stranger, the partner was located in a tiny Nevada town, a place where our company had zero construction activity. My heart pounded. This was my first real piece of evidence. The next morning, I rushed into my father's office, dropping the contract on his desk. "Dad, this is illegal. The Nevada company doesn't exist." He frowned, but before he could say anything, Victoria walked in with that familiar smile. "Lucas, you're overthinking again. You really need rest." She turned to my father, her voice laced with fake concern. "Charles, I think Lucas is stressed from overworking. Maybe he should take some time off." I was furious. "Dad, you have to believe me. She's siphoning money from the company." My father placed a tired hand on my shoulder. "Lucas, this isn't the time for accusations. Victoria has helped me so much. You should rest for a few weeks." I froze. It felt like the world collapsed beneath me. No one believed me. Not even my father. Victoria stood behind him, smiling a victorious smile only I could see. That night, I stood alone in front of Bennett Industries. The building's lights reflected off the glass like 1,000 cold fragments. I realized that from the moment I was pushed aside, I had no other choice. If no one believed the truth, I would build the power to force everyone to hear it. That was the moment I decided. I will take Victoria down, even if I have to start from zero. I will never forget the morning I was summoned to the meeting room on the 40th floor. The moment the door opened, the air thickened as if every gaze inside was preparing to judge me. And just as I expected, Victoria was sitting beside my father, her eyes cold, and her smile sharp like a blade wrapped in velvet. I stepped in, trying to stay composed. But as soon as I sat down, CFO Ethan Ward Victoria's right hand, pushed a thick stack of documents toward me. "Lucas, we need answers for the losses in the Golden Ridge project. It happened under your supervision." I glanced over the numbers, and my stomach dropped. This was the project I had been deliberately cut out of for weeks. I knew this was a trap. Ethan continued. "The report shows you approved payments without financial authorization. This caused nearly $1 million in losses. Do you have anything to say?" I looked at my father, hoping he would defend me, or at least question the validity of the evidence. But his eyes were dull and exhausted, as though he no longer wished to face anything complicated. Victoria gently placed her hand on his, whispering something I couldn't hear, but enough to make him avoid my gaze. "I never approved any of this," I said. "Someone used my access. My passwords have been changed multiple times without my consent." Victoria flashed a sympathetic smile. "Lucas, no one has touched your accounts. You must understand that you haven't been stable lately. These mistakes, your father is very worried." My hands clenched. Unstable? That was exactly the narrative she wanted everyone to believe. The meeting continued like a grotesque performance. Ethan presented falsified reports. Victoria exploited every weakness she had fabricated, and my father sat silently like a man being led by the hand. I tried to present the truth, to explain, to pull everyone back to reality, but my words were swallowed by the void. Finally, the chairman of the board said, "Lucas, we are temporarily suspending your operational authority for 3 months pending internal investigation." I shot to my feet. "You're all falling into Victoria's trap. You're letting the company fall into the hands of someone who's draining it every single day." The room buzzed with whispers as if I had said the most irrational thing imaginable. Victoria merely tilted her head and smiled, a victorious smile. When the meeting ended, I walked down the long hallway with legs heavy as stone. Grace Lee, the financial assistant, hurried after me, anxiety written all over her face. "Lucas, I don't believe what they're saying, but I can't help you. My access was revoked this morning." I nodded. I understood. The people still on my side were being removed one by one. That afternoon, the suspension notice was emailed to the entire company. Within hours, I had become the person blamed for financial losses. Co-workers avoided me. Employees looked at me as if I were responsible for something terrible. A twisted version of the story had spread at frightening speed. I left the Bennett Industries building just as the sun was turning orange. The glass doors closed behind me, and I saw my reflection. Small, isolated, crushed by the very place I had devoted my life to. I realized this was no longer an internal dispute. This was war, and I had just lost the first battle. That night, I drove through the familiar streets of Los Angeles, but everything felt foreign. I stopped at the Santa Monica shoreline, watching the waves crash while my mind churned with helplessness. I had lost my position, lost my access, lost my father's trust, and Victoria had never been more powerful. But amid that darkness, one thought appeared, clear and sharp. If I couldn't protect the company as its heir, then I would protect it as someone with real power. Power that Victoria couldn't reach or manipulate. I knew what I had to do, and to do it, I had to leave this place. I left Los Angeles on a morning colder than usual. It wasn't raining, but there was something somber drifting across the sky, carried by the gray clouds above. I drove through the night, heading north to San Francisco, the city of restarts, the city of those beaten down yet stubborn enough to rebuild their fate. I told no one, not even my father. After that fateful meeting, I knew no one in Bennett Industries would stand up for me anymore, and I had no reason to stay. The apartment I rented near the financial district was small but quiet, just enough for me to sit by the window every night and watch the city lights flicker. But San Francisco was not gentle with someone starting from zero. On my first day attending a corporate finance seminar, I felt invisible among a sea of sharply dressed people with cold eyes and hurried steps. This place was not for the weak. No one cared that I was the Bennett heir, only whether I had something worth bringing to the table. I enrolled in intensive courses on fund management, corporate finance, M&A, and forensic accounting. Without a CEO title or the power of my father's company behind me, I had to build my own credibility. Classes stretched from morning to night, Some days I fell asleep at my desk, yet I pushed myself to understand every detail about cash flow models, risk structures, and valuation. I knew all of this knowledge would one day be my weapon when I returned to Los Angeles in a completely different form. Then came a Friday afternoon that changed everything. A tall, silver-haired man with sharp eyes walked into the classroom. He wasn't an instructor. He was Richard Dalton, a former Wall Street financial strategist known for reviving 3 major corporations from collapse. He had been invited to speak, but when his eyes scanned the roster, they stopped on one name: Lucas Bennett. "Why are you here? The Bennett Industries heir?" he asked after class. I hesitated. "I lost my position at the company." He didn't show sympathy. He only nodded lightly, as if he had heard this story many times before. "Good," he said. "People kicked out of power chairs usually learn faster than those who've never lost anything." I laughed bitterly. But for the first time, I felt someone truly saw me. Not as a failure, but as a man trying to begin again. Richard agreed to guide me, but not in the gentle teacher-student way. He threw me into real-world assignments, analyzing hundreds-page financial statements, building capital flow models, predicting fraud in accounting data. Once, he tossed me a stack of files and said, "If you want to defeat someone draining a company, you must first understand every way they can hide it." I dove into learning like a starving man. Every night I worked until 2 or 3 in the morning, constructing spreadsheets, analyzing transactions, trying to understand every nuance I once ignored. With each passing day, I saw more clearly how meticulously Victoria had set me up. But I also realized I wasn't inferior to her intelligence. I had only been unprepared, lacking strength. After 3 months, Richard asked, "So, what will you do with all this knowledge?" Without hesitation, I said, "Build something strong enough to face Victoria." He smirked. "Then let's begin." And that was how Bennett Capital Holdings was born. I created it in a small room in an old building near South of Market. No logo, no employees, just me and a laptop. But I believed that to create power, one must first create value. I started consulting for small businesses, analyzing finances for startups, and gradually building a reputation. I never used the Bennett name for influence. I wanted every contract signed with me to come from merit, not legacy. I needed people, and the first person I approached was Mason Brooks, a forensic accounting specialist and white-hat hacker Richard had worked with. Mason disliked working within rules, but when I told him I intended to take down someone involved in sophisticated money laundering, his eyes lit up like he had been handed a new toy. "All right," he said, "but you'd better be ready to face dirt you've never seen before." From that day on, we built a network. Lawyers, forensic accountants, small funds willing to collaborate, and financial insiders ready to provide information. I was no longer Lucas Bennett, who had been expelled from his company. I became someone quietly building the strength needed to return. The day I closed my first $10 million deal, not huge by financial industry standards, but monumental for me, I knew I had made my first declaration to the world that I was no longer out of the game. I remember my hands shaking, not from fear, but because I knew I had just laid the first brick on the path back to Los Angeles. Standing by the window of my small office, watching San Francisco glow under the nightlights, I realized I had only one goal left. It was time to return. Time to face Victoria with real power, the kind she would never expect. I returned to Los Angeles on a moonless evening. That city, once my home, once my pride, once the place I believed I would one day inherit, had become the battlefield I had to enter with a completely new face. I didn't go home. I didn't go to the company. Instead, I rented a small office in Beverly Hills, hidden yet close enough to Bennett Industries for me to feel the pulse of the empire Victoria was slowly claiming. Richard and Mason had arrived earlier. The office held only one desk, 3 chairs, and a whiteboard. But for us, it was a command center. Every power struggle began in rooms like this. I understood that more clearly than ever. "We need the full map," Richard said as he approached the board. "If we want to bring Victoria down, we must know where the money is going, who's helping her, and what her final goal is." Mason pushed his laptop toward me. "I've been tracking Bennett's cash flow over the last 3 months. You need to see this." On the screen was a complex web of financial movements. Small amounts, very small, split apart to avoid attention, then merged again into an account in Nevada. I stared at the final figure, a cold chill crawling down my spine.
She took more than $28 million in 6 months?
Mason nodded. That's only the confirmed amount. I suspect the real number may be double. I stayed silent for a few seconds, then clenched my fists. Victoria wasn't just siphoning funds. She was preparing for a takeover. And my father might be signing things he didn't fully understand.
I want to know what the Nevada Shell Company is, I said.
Mason opened another folder. Here, Silverland Transport LLC, listed under a 72-year-old man, but he died last year. Someone's using his identity.
I closed my eyes and took a deep breath.
Victoria had planned every step, every detail to hide her tracks. But every iceberg had a base, and I would dig to the bottom. Within a week, we had mapped Victoria's entire network. Loyal lawyers, minor politicians, a group inside the company willing to follow her orders, and a sophisticated laundering chain in Nevada. Staring at the full picture, I realized something. Defeating Victoria required more than evidence. It required striking at her true objective.
Victoria didn't want money. Victoria wanted absolute power. She wanted to be the rightful head of Bennett Industries.
And that would only happen if my father signed over temporary executive authority to her.
You have 3 months, Richard said.
After that, if Charles's health gets worse, or if Victoria gathers enough votes in the board, she will gain legal control.
3 months.
A race against time.
I began buying Bennett Industries shares through intermediaries, small, anonymous investment funds that Mason set up for me. If I bought directly, Victoria would notice immediately and counterattack. Each week I purchased about 0.5%. Not much, but enough to build power without drawing attention. Meanwhile, Mason continued monitoring the cash flow. One night, he called me at 3 in the morning. Lucas, you need to see this.
On the screen was a scan of a document. Temporary full financial authorization, signed by my father and Victoria. But what chilled me wasn't the signature. It was the date. On that day, my father had been hospitalized after a sudden heart episode.
I called my father's private doctor.
On the 15th of last month, was my father lucid?
No,
the doctor said. He was under sedatives. He couldn't have knowingly signed anything. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing it shut. Victoria had done the unthinkable. She obtained financial power through a signature from someone mentally unfit to sign.
That was illegal.
I need the original copy of that document, I said.
Mason scoffed.
It's in Victoria's office safe. What are you going to do? Break in?
I looked at him.
If I have to, I will. But it didn't come to that. 2 days later, I received an anonymous email from someone inside the company. Only one sentence. Victoria will transfer assets on Friday. If you want to save the company, show up. I didn't know who it was, but it was the only chance. Richard, Mason, and I prepared everything. The laundering evidence, the Nevada Shell contracts, and the illegal authorizations signed during my father's sedation.
Friday arrived.
Victoria walked into Bennett Industries, wearing her usual cream-colored dress, the color she always chose when she wanted to demonstrate authority. My father was present too, looking weaker but trying his best to stay composed. I entered the room right as Victoria placed the transfer document in front of him.
Lucas, my father said softly.
Victoria turned, cold smile curved on her lips. Why are you here? This is a family meeting. I placed a heavy folder on the table. No, Victoria, this is your end. The air froze. For the first time, Victoria's eyes flickered. She knew. I had found something she never wanted the world to see, and the real battle had just begun. I flew to New York early in the morning on the day of the annual shareholders meeting. This city always felt like the heart of the financial world, where decisions could create or destroy empires within hours. But today, I wasn't here to learn or observe from the sidelines. I was here to end a plot that could permanently destroy Bennett Industries. The meeting was held at the Bennett Tower, the Manhattan branch. The 51st floor was blazing with lights, packed with shareholders, financial reporters, and brokers crowding the hallway. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to steady my breathing. This was the most important moment since I left Los Angeles. When I entered the conference room, Victoria was already on stage, wearing her signature cream-colored blazer, her smile bright as if she were the savior of the entire corporation. I spotted my father sitting in the front row, looking frail and distant, as if he no longer recognized the company he had spent his life building. Victoria spoke with confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past 6 months we have faced many challenges. And to ensure long-term stability, I propose officially assuming temporary executive authority from Chairman Charles Bennett.
Applause broke out, small at first, then louder.
Some shareholders nodded. Others exchanged looks as if they had already been convinced.
I knew Victoria had prepared for this moment for a long time.
I walked forward. Hold on. The entire room fell silent. Everyone turned toward me. The man they thought had disappeared from the game. Victoria paused for half a second, then flashed a rehearsed smile. Lucas, are you here to cause trouble again? This is an official meeting.
I held her gaze.
Yes, and I'm here to end the lies.
Whispers erupted.
Reporters raised their cameras. I placed a thick folder on the podium. I have critical evidence involving corporate embezzlement, money laundering through Nevada shell companies, and the misuse of Chairman Charles Bennett's signature while he was not legally competent.
Victoria let out a laugh.
Lucas, you're imagining things. All corporate records have been audited. Audited by whom? I cut in. By Ethan, the guy laundering money for you?
Noise spread across the room.
I opened the folder. Here is the cash flow of the past 6 months. $28 million transferred to Silverland Transport LLC, a company under the name of a deceased man, all signed by you. And here, hospital footage showing you forcing my father to sign the authorization while he was under sedation. The massive screen behind me lit up. The video played. The room went dead silent. In the footage, my father sat on the hospital bed, dazed, trembling. Victoria placed a pen in his hand, speaking in a coaxing yet coercive tone. I heard gasps from the shareholders. Some even turned away in shock. My father, once a pillar of strength, had been used like a tool for her power grab. Victoria's face drained of color, though she tried to stay composed. This is fabricated. I stared at her. If you claim it's fake, then explain why the FBI issued a warrant this morning, based on the evidence we submitted. Right then, 2 FBI agents entered the room. One held up his badge. We need to speak with Mrs. Victoria Hale regarding an ongoing federal money laundering investigation. Chaos erupted. Victoria lost control completely. You can't do this to me. I'm the one keeping this company from collapsing. And Lucas, I said calmly, no. You kept it for yourself, not for Bennett Industries. My father looked up at me, tears gathering in his eyes. Lucas, is all of this true? Yes, Dad, I said quietly. And I'll fix everything. Some shareholders stood up and applauded. Others lowered their heads, ashamed they once supported her. The energy in the room shifted entirely. As the agents escorted Victoria out, she turned toward me, hatred burning in her eyes. You think you've won? This is only the beginning, I replied. Yes, and I'm ready. The meeting continued without Victoria. The chairman of the board stood up, voice firm. With these undeniable evidences, we officially revoke Victoria Hale's executive authority. And from now on, Lucas Bennett will serve as acting CEO of Bennett Industries. I stood there, feeling the weight of both past and future pressing into me. I wasn't happy. I wasn't triumphant. I simply felt relief, as if I had finally pulled the company away from the cliff. But I knew one thing clearly. Victoria was right about one thing. This was only the beginning. I thought that after Victoria was escorted out of the shareholders' meeting by the FBI, everything would calm down. I thought the truth alone would be enough to end it all. But I was wrong. Ambitious people never accept defeat easily. Victoria might have lost her executive power, but her network still existed. People indebted to her, those she had elevated, politicians she had secretly funded. I had only cut off the dragon's head. The body was still hiding underground, waiting to rise again. Just a few days after the New York incident, the media suddenly shifted direction. Anonymous articles appeared accusing me of seizing power while my father was ill, fabricating evidence to eliminate my stepmother, and even inventing the entire money laundering case for personal gain. I knew immediately who was behind those smears. Victoria had launched her counterattack. That night, in the CEO's office, I watched the scrolling gossip headlines with a mix of frustration and amusement. Truth, for those with power and money, could be twisted beyond recognition. Mason walked in and threw a stack of new documents on my desk. "Victoria's lawyers are attacking," Mason said. "They're suing you for defamation, manipulation, and exploiting your father's health to seize control." I smirked. She wants to drag me into the mud to save herself. Richard joined us, his voice low. "Lucas, I've reviewed their case. Victoria's legal team is strong. She even pulled in Senator Price, a politician she once funded, as a character witness." "A politician?" I inhaled sharply. Her network went deeper than I expected. "We need a stronger counterattack," I said. "We need a decisive blow," Richard replied. But that decisive blow arrived in a way I did not expect. The next morning, Mason rushed into my office with rare excitement. "Lucas, you have to see this." He opened his laptop to reveal a chain of leaked emails. I skimmed the contents, feeling my entire body go cold. They were emails between Victoria and a partner in a Nevada casino chain. The messages detailed exactly how they laundered money, breaking transactions into tiny amounts, recombining them, then pushing the funds into silver land transport under the guise of transportation. Victoria even bragged to her partner that the entire executive board trusts me. Perfect. Indisputable evidence. "How did you get this?" I asked. Mason grinned. "Someone in her network thinks Victoria is about to flee and doesn't want to go down with her. They forwarded it directly to my hidden server." I collapsed into my chair. The wall of lies Victoria had built over months was finally cracking. But emails alone weren't enough. I needed the final piece, the one that would destroy every counterattack she had left. I found it in the financial statements of a small casino called Silver Dunes. A $3.5 million entry labeled as Transportation Contingency Funds. A note so absurd it was almost funny. What did a casino have to do with transportation? I called Richard immediately. "This is the laundering midpoint," he confirmed. "If we trace the original fund source, Victoria will have no escape." We spent 3 straight days tracing every transaction. Mason hacking internal servers, Richard reviewing ledgers, and me contacting a forensic specialist who had previously worked with the FBI. Finally, we obtained a verified conclusion. Victoria had laundered over $40 million through the Nevada casino chain within a year. I stared at the report, my hands trembling from adrenaline. This was the finishing blow. I called the FBI. They requested that I forward all data to match with their ongoing investigation. When I submitted the evidence, one agent said, "Mr. Bennett, this time, no one will be able to save her." That evening, I stood alone in the CEO's office. The lights of Los Angeles shimmered across the city, cold and mesmerizing. For months, I had fought against my own reflection, helplessness, my father's misplaced trust, and the betrayal of the woman I once called stepmother. And now, I finally saw the light of an ending. But just as I was about to leave the office, my phone rang. A soft female voice whispered, "Lucas, do you really think you've won?" My chest tightened. I recognized the voice instantly. "Victoria, I won't let you destroy my life," she said, her voice no longer icy but filled with desperation. "You have no idea what I sacrificed to get here. And you have no idea how many people you destroyed to achieve it," I replied. "Lucas, if I go down, I'll drag you with me." "You don't have the strength to drag anyone anymore, Victoria." There was silence on the other end. Then she laughed, a thin, weak laugh, but filled with menace. "You have no idea what I still have." And she hung up. I stood still for a few seconds. Part of me knew that laugh wasn't an empty threat. Victoria still had a final card, and I had to be ready to face it. The phone call with Victoria haunted me all night. I wasn't afraid of her, but I feared the desperation of someone who had lost everything. People like her were dangerous, and Victoria, more than anyone, was the kind who would burn the world down just to keep whatever piece of power she still had. The next morning when I entered the office, Mason was already waiting with an unusually tense expression. "Lucas, we have a big problem," he said. "What could be bigger than everything that's already happened?" I replied. Mason turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a report from the internal audit system. $17.5 million had just disappeared from one of the company's reserve accounts. I shot to my feet. "Impossible. That account has 3 layers of security. 3 layers of your security, Mason emphasized. Not Victoria's. My hands clenched into fists. She's trying to throw away the last pile of money to escape. Not just escape, Mason said, lowering his voice. She's trying to destroy the company before she falls. Richard walked in, his expression heavy. Lucas, I just heard from a friend at the Treasury. A series of articles smearing Bennett Industries is about to be released. If they go public, the company's stock will crash within 48 hours. I tightened my jaw. Victoria wants to burn everything. Richard nodded. If Bennett collapses, she can blame the downfall on you, and she'll no longer be responsible. Rage surged through me like a flood. I saved the company from her, and now, in desperation, she wanted to drag it down, just to take everything from me. But anger quickly gave way to clarity. We need to find her, I said. She's already hiding, Mason replied. No, I said firmly. Victoria isn't the kind of person who runs immediately. She'll stay to watch me collapse. Richard thought for a moment, then nodded. Then we only need to find the place where she plans to watch the show. I knew Victoria well enough. She always chose places that were luxurious, hidden, and surrounded by people who could protect her image. And there was only one such place in Los Angeles. Rosewood Miramar Beach, the retreat of the wealthy when they wanted to avoid the public eye. I drove there with Mason. The ocean wind blew hard, bringing the smell of salt and the coldness of late afternoon. As soon as I entered the lobby, I saw her, sitting near the window, wearing her cream-colored coat, staring out at the sea as if nothing could hurt her anymore. But that was only surface. When I approached, Victoria turned, her lips curling into the familiar smile that had fooled many. You finally came. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. $17.5 million. What do you plan to do with it? Oh, she sighed, as if telling a story unrelated to herself. I just wanted a little capital to start a new life. A new life built on the ashes you leave behind at Bennett? She glanced at me. Lucas, do you understand? I spent my whole life trying to prove my worth. I wasn't born with privilege like you. I stared into her eyes. That doesn't give you the right to destroy my father's company. Her gaze softened. Then she leaned forward and spoke quietly. Lucas, you don't know the truth. I frowned. What truth? She remained silent for a few seconds, then pulled an envelope from her purse. She pushed it toward me. I opened it and felt my world drop. Inside was a DNA test report. Name, Lucas Bennett. Conclusion, no biological relation to Charles Bennett. I froze. The air turned solid around me. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was seeing. You're joking, I said, voice trembling. No, she replied softly. Your father is not your biological father. He has known it for years. Your mother had another relationship. Her words stabbed straight into my chest. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Victoria continued. He kept you, raised you, because he loved your mother. But legally, you have no inheritance rights over Bennett Industries. She tilted her head. You understand what that means, don't you? It meant, if she wanted to bring me down, she had the perfect weapon. I stared at the test results, my hand turning white from how tightly I gripped the paper. Lucas, Victoria went on, her voice smooth yet toxic. If I release this, you will lose everything. Your identity, the company, the CEO position, and your father, already frail, will face the biggest scandal of his life. I lifted my gaze, meeting hers for a long moment. This was her final card. Not money, not power, but truth. The kind that could destroy a man with a single reveal. But after a moment of silence, I spoke slowly. You underestimate me, Victoria. She raised an eyebrow. I stood up. You think one piece of paper can destroy me? You forget. Bennett Industries survives because of who is running it, not because of whose blood is in their veins. Then I stared directly at her. And you? What exactly do you survive on? Victoria smiled. Not the arrogant smile this time, but the smile of someone who had reached the end of their road. You're right, Lucas. You're stronger than I thought. But then her eyes darkened. But I'm not finished. I left the hotel, my heartbeat pounding violently. I knew she wasn't lying. She would release the DNA test, and when she did, the whole world would turn against me. I left Rosewood Miramar Beach with a weight heavy as stone inside me. The ocean wind hit my face cold and sharp. but it was nothing compared to the storm that would come once Victoria released the DNA test to the public. I sat inside my car for a few minutes, letting my heartbeat settle.
If I were a weak man, I would have fallen apart right there. But I had gone too far to turn back. And what Victoria didn't understand was this.
True power isn't in blood. It's in choice.
And I chose to fight.
That night, I went to visit my father in the hospital. He was asleep, his face thinner than before, but peaceful. When I sat down beside him, his eyes opened, tired but warm as always.
"Lucas," he whispered.
"I'm here, Dad."
He was silent for a few seconds, then sighed.
"Victoria told you, didn't she?" I didn't respond. I just looked at him, enough for him to understand. He turned toward the window, his eyes sad and distant. "I'm sorry. I should have told you long ago. But I was afraid. Afraid you'd think I didn't love you as my own son." I squeezed his hand. "You don't need to apologize. You raised me, taught me, cared for me. I am your son. Nothing about that requires DNA." Tears streamed down the cheeks of the man who had once been the pillar of a financial empire. He held my hand tightly. "Lucas, even without blood, you're the person I trust the most. I want you to keep Bennett Industries. Not for me, but because you earned it." Those words melted the ice inside me. The truth was no longer a weapon against me. It became the reason I stood stronger. But Victoria didn't wait long. Exactly 36 hours after our meeting at the hotel, the DNA test leaked to the media. Hundreds of articles, thousands of comments. "Lucas Bennett is not a real Bennett. Fake CEO. The biggest financial scandal of the year."
A tidal wave. But I was ready.
I called an emergency press conference at Bennett Industries. The room was filled with reporters, cameras flashing non-stop. The atmosphere was suffocating.
I stepped onto the stage, not hiding, not avoiding.
"I'm Lucas Bennett," I began calmly. "And yes, I am not biologically related to Chairman Charles Bennett." A collective gasp filled the room. I raised my hand, signaling them to remain silent. "But DNA only speaks of origin. It doesn't define worth. Charles Bennett kept me, raised me, trusted me, not because of blood, but because he knew I would protect this company with my life."
I looked straight into the cameras.
Straight into the judgment of the world. Victoria Hale released the DNA test to attack me and this company. But before she did, Bennett Industries traced over $40 million she laundered through a chain of Nevada casinos.
I held up a thick folder. "This is the final evidence."
Behind me, the screen lit up with her emails, transactions, contracts, everything. And 30 minutes before this press conference, the FBI issued a federal arrest warrant for Victoria Hale.
The room exploded.
Reporters shouted, scrambled, snapped photos, sent live updates.
News spread like wildfire.
Finally, truth had won. 3 days later, Victoria was arrested at the US-Mexico border while attempting to flee with forged documents. Her handcuffed photo hit the front page of every newspaper. Her laundering network collapsed. Meanwhile, I returned to the CEO's office, looking up at the Bennett building standing tall like a warrior that had survived the storm. My father recovered well. He called me to his room and placed a hand on my shoulder.
"Lucas, you did what no one else could. I'm proud of you."
And for the first time in months, I felt peace. I didn't win because I carried the Bennett bloodline. I won because I protected what deserved to be protected. Bennett Industries was never a legacy of blood. It was a legacy of integrity, justice, and choosing the right side. I stood by the window looking at the endless golden lights of Los Angeles. I had started from zero. I had fought corruption. I had survived truths that could break any man. Now I was no longer the disowned heir. I was Lucas Bennett, and I had rewritten my destiny.